Alright, so as we're starting to roll into October, I figured we would go into the two really campy snake movies, both of which are a lot of fun in their own way. But the thing about it is, when you look at the differences between the two, it does seem like, and I feel like both of these maybe don't get as much credit as they deserve for certain aspects of them. Maybe that's the case. Because with Anaconda, I feel like there was actually, when you look at like the production values of it, and you see like the locations and the cast that they've assembled, it kind of feels like Anaconda went the more appropriate route to me as far as becoming a movie that people see as campy and they come back to for its glorious, over the top, and unintentionally bad nature, I guess you could call it. That's the thing, is it feels like it was set out to be a movie that wasn't bad and wasn't campy. It just became that by accident. And like I said, I feel like those are the best campy movies. And I've talked before about stuff where a campy movie is made on purpose and how that feels really cheap to me and really forced. And there's nothing authentic about its feel. It's all manufactured to essentially be a meme. And it probably sounds like I've just explained Snakes on a Plane directly. The thing about it, though, is that Snakes on a Plane did start off as something that I think was meant to more or less be a pretty straightforward script. And then as word got around online and stuff like that, then it became the meme. Then they went back and kind of leaned into the meme, and then the movie became what it was. So, and we'll talk about why I don't think Snakes on a Plane falls in that category. Like, it doesn't fall into like the Sharknado category where I just hate it so much because it's so forced and because they were trying so hard to make it, like campy and a meme and stuff like that. And it didn't happen by accident like it seems to have with Anaconda. But before we go into all that, I think it'd be easier just kind of take these one at a time. So I want to put the focus on Anaconda first, especially since it came out first. It came out 9 years earlier. It feels like there's an eternity between them, because I remember seeing Anaconda on like the movie channels when I was like right when it first came out. And I always watched it, but I was also kind of terrified of it, or at least terrified of certain scenes, and we'll talk about those. But when you talk about it actually attempting to be an effective horror movie, there is a pretty decent opening here where Danny Trejo gets terrorized by the snake, and we don't... The thing about it is we don't see it. They took the Jaws approach, and I feel like you can kind of tell they're intentionally taking the Jaws approach of, well, if, Spielberg barely showing the shark made it really effective, why don't we try that for a little bit? And so, not only is that gonna build up, making the snake more scary and effective when he's kind of unseen, but taking into account that seeing Danny Trejo scared of something that we can't see, up to the point that he decides to commit suicide rather than be confronted by it or be killed by it in the way that he would be. And that's the opening scene of the movie, and it's like, that's a pretty good tone setter, because if Danny Trejo is that afraid of something, we should have been running the other direction a long time ago. So, even though he wasn't like Danny Trejo yet, like we know him, still, in retrospect especially, it really sets the tone well. And like I was saying, when you look at the cast list here, it's kind of insane. We've got Jennifer Lopez when she was kind of really peak Jennifer Lopez in like all degrees, where not just her music career, but I think Selena had happened by this point, so even in like Hollywood she was really up to this point by now. And Ice Cube, and an Oscar winner in Jon Voight, but you also have like Eric Stoltz and Owen Wilson and Jonathan Hyde, who all children of the 90s love and recognize immediately. And you see, and it's interesting to see those actors put in these circumstances. I think this was also the year after Bottle Rocket for Owen Wilson, so like, everybody was in a really good place that was in this movie at the time. And so, like I said, that kind of gives it this factor of, I don't think this movie was intended to be what its reputation ended up being. And so that makes it especially interesting to look at as it unfolds, but it's also funny when you talk about Snakes on a Plane being born out of a meme, and I believe it's Ice Cube's first line in the movie is, "Today's a good day." And so it's like, not only, obviously, you know, in the movie that's supposed to be a haha reference to his song, but the fact that that now is a meme and has been a meme for like a decade or more at this point, and that this movie kind of made that before memes were even a thing, that they went for that reference. But as far as the other characters, we have Jonathan Hyde coming in with lines like, you know, asshole in one about, you know, golf clubs or something. And it's, or no, it's when he hits John Voight with the golf club is what it is. And so to give actors like this campy dialogue and these cliche horror situations is just really fascinating to me through the whole movie. Especially since Eric Stoltz is like unconscious for most. Like Eric Stoltz is sleeping through the climax, and it's like, okay, this is an interesting way to treat this sort of prestigious ensemble you have. But that's the kind of movie it is, and that's the kind of movie everybody signed up for, it seems. So, and we even have like Owen Wilson and his girlfriend like go out into the middle of the dark woods and start making out, and it's like it's not only that, this is like teenagers in horror movies behavior that these prestigious actors are doing at this point. Owen Wilson being a prestigious writer by this point, even that. But talking about prestigious actors coming in here and doing their thing, I'd be remiss if we didn't just talk about Jon Voight right now. So, Oscar winner Jon Voight waltzes into this movie, and he's got an accent and a ponytail, and he's a snake trapper. And he's going all in on this. And this is one of those cases where good luck to anybody trying to figure out how the fuck Jon Voight's mind works anyway. But every time I watch this, I try to decipher if he's in on a joke or not. If he was going all in because he thought he was doing something that was like a truly great performance in this sort of this character that could have been iconic in another universe if this movie were more I don't know, some blockbuster epic that it would be in another universe, or if he came in just knowing it was going to have this campy reputation. Like, I would assume it was almost instantaneous it got this reputation, because it did get, like, a bunch of Razzie nominations and stuff like that. I don't really give a fuck about the Razzies and stuff like that, but it did seem like it had a certain reputation at the time. It just seems like people have grown more fond of that reputation as it goes on. But looking at what he's doing here, what's interesting about him also is that they kind of build up to him being a big villain of the movie. Like, he already seems unsavory and weird and untrustworthy in a way. But I mean, he saves Owen Wilson a couple of times, and he has all the knowledge that he's kind of passing on to them of what to do and how to survive and stuff like that, and do what they want to do. And this is kind of before we know that he's got, like, another plot in mind. So, as far as him seeming like he's just sort of part of the crew, and he's just kind of the leader of the group now that he's here because he has all the knowledge, you could argue that they could have made it more ambiguous that he was gonna go full villain eventually. But I actually think it works a lot more in the movie's favor. It's a lot more fun that he's so obviously unhinged the whole time. Even when he seems like he could be this sort of, like... I imagine they were, for more Jaws references, I imagine they were going for, like, a Quint in Jaws for this character, who then ultimately ends up being a bad guy, or the bad guy, really. But, with Quint, you can kind of tell it was like, this guy's unhinged, but he's also a crucial part of the crew, and he's not going to try to kill all of us or anything. And so to twist on that, but like I said, it feels like there's no secret here at all, that he's completely unhinged and should be avoided at all costs, that the worst decision they could have made was pulling him onto the boat. And I love that they just kind of run with that. I also love, I love some of his dialogue when you talk about him sort of being, because obviously when you have a big monster movie, a lot of times they'll try to throw in this sort of context of, oh, but maybe humans are even worse, or like the worst kind of human is worse than the worst kind of monster, or something like that. So he gets lines like, don't make me out to be a monster, I didn't eat the captain. And stuff like that, I can just really appreciate from this movie and this performance and the way they handle this character. Though it is interesting that, for as obviously unhinged and over the top as he is, he's also pretty methodical. and the way that he brainwashes Owen Wilson especially, where like you'll notice when you watch the movie, Owen Wilson's character's name is Gary. So when he's like talking to people, he just kind of talks to them. But when he talks to Gary, he specifically always calls him by name. Like early on, he singled out, "This is the guy I'm brainwashing," and that ends up working and paying off. And that's surprisingly like there's merit to where the character's coming from as far as his experience and his knowledge and what he's capable of, and then ultimately uses it for over the top campy villainy, which is fantastic. But I also love the idea of when you're trying to compare, like, oh, are humans worse than monsters, or at least humans like this? And so he literally kills Owen Wilson's girlfriend by squeezing her to death, just like the snake does. It's all very on the nose and very obvious, but like I said, with a movie like this, that's kind of the fun. The more over the top and obvious it is about itself, and the more it doesn't seem to give a fuck. Because, like I said, when you look at the production values, it seemed like they were trying to make a legit movie. Especially when you look at the effects themselves, like of the snake, where it was like they were taking Jurassic Park approaches, where you can see the CGI does not look great. But they did the Jurassic Park thing where they go back and forth between CGI and like animatronics and stuff that's like actually physically there. Particularly Mateo, I think he is, the other bad guy, the captain that gets eaten. When he gets attacked, it's like when it starts to wrap around him, you can tell that nothing is touching him. Like he's like there's a CGI snake around him, but nothing is physically touching him at all. And then there's a cut, and then when we cut back to him, it's clear there's actually something there, like some kind of animatronic or something that's actually wrapped around him. And so trying to combine the CGI with the practical is, especially now, is something that I can still appreciate, even if a lot of it doesn't look seamless by any means, but I can still appreciate it. But the fact that it did seem like they were trying to make a legit movie, but they were trying to make a legit movie out of what they must have known was like a B movie. Because despite being more or less a B movie, it doesn't look cheap. Like, it looks shoddy by today's standards, but it doesn't look cheap, especially when you think about it being 1997. I think the real locations sort of help that a lot also, and the big name cast, and how all the cast was like kind of important by this point. So, and you'll see techniques in here also that are kind of inspired. Like, once again, if you want to go back to Jaws again, the point of view shot from like the monster. And so when you get that in this movie, there's times where you can kind of debate with yourself about, is that actually what it is? Where there's one moment where we're at like an angle and we're like coming up on the boat and the camera's moving like really slowly, and sometimes you're not really sure if it's supposed to be a snake point of view shot or if it's just a shot, just a normal shot. And I like the fact of kind of making it ambiguous sometimes about what, if we're looking through the snake's point of view, if he's about to pounce, or if it's just the camera moving and that's just all it is. And so they throw stuff like that in enough to where it's not a poorly made movie. It's super campy, obviously, but I feel like you can be well made and be campy at the same time. I feel like this movie's kind of a good representation of how to be able to do that. Because it even doesn't stray away from, some character emotion, which usually is like the first thing these kind of movies will abandon. But like you have the moment where Gary gets eaten and his girlfriend has like genuine devastation when that happens, that kind of carries through for her character until she ends up getting killed. And that's something you don't typically see in movies like this. And like I was talking about also, as far as like generally effective things, when I saw this movie multiple times on movie channels as a kid, there were images that ingrained themselves in my brain forever. Now, obviously that happens a lot when you're a kid, but I do wonder if these images would mean anything to me at all if I saw this movie. Not necessarily now, but like maybe late, like maybe when I was in like my early 20s or late teens or something, if that's the first time I saw the movie, if that imagery would still stick. Like, when they have to cut Eric Stoltz's throat open so he can breathe after he swallows the wasp or whatever it is, that really stuck out. When, after the snake has eaten Owen Wilson and it's swimming in the water and we can see Owen Wilson's whole outline, especially his face in it, that really etched itself into my brain for a very long time. That was one of those things where I was kind of afraid to like close my eyes at night going to bed because it was like I would see the outline of Owen Wilson's face inside the snake. It looks very CGI now, but I mean, it was really effective at the time. And the CGI snake is something also I feel like I didn't notice in the '90s when it was still kind of a new thing for movies to be this CGI heavy. And it's like only with time does it look sort of shoddy in a sense. Like I said, maybe that's just a kid's viewpoint though. But you also have Danny Trejo's death scene at the beginning, or John Voight getting spit out. Obviously, it's like the most legendary scene in this movie is John Voight getting eaten and then spit back out, and he fucking winks before he hits the ground. It's like that's the moment where it's like, okay, he literally winked. He's got to be in on it. That has to answer that question, right? But like I said, like it's hard to read John Voight's mind, so I'll take it either way. Honestly, it's just as entertaining one way or the other. There's also some pretty cool moments, like when like Jonathan Hyde's death scene when he's like in mid fall and the snake comes down and catches him and eats him that way, and it's like once again, even though you can tell it's a CGI snake and the effect is not flawless. I don't know, that seems still kind of cool to me. That's a cool way to go out. And it actually has a pretty surprisingly exciting climax, where we have the problem of John Voight and the snake. But even once John Voight's out of the picture, they still handle the action of it. And Jennifer Lopez and Ice Cube like actually have these sort of action hero qualities to them that actually make the ending work and make it actually just exciting in general, and not just like, oh god, what stupid thing are they going to do next? Like, even when the snake catches fire is one of those things where, like, I think it's also one of those movies that happened early enough that it didn't get swept up in the idea of feeling like it was, like, trying too hard. Because if I watched a movie today where the main characters were being chased by an anaconda that was on fire, I would think, you're trying really hard to be memorable, and it's so obvious, it's so transparent. Like I said, it came out early enough to where I feel like I didn't see shit like that at the time often. So it kind of still has that cool quality to it that they were actually going for, that I feel like they actually might accomplish. And I feel like when you look at movies later, like Lake Placid, which I want to say was like maybe 2 years after this, and I talked about Lake Placid last year, and I'm just, as hard as I try, I just can't get into Lake Placid. And I feel like what Lake Placid was trying to do was basically what Anaconda got away with. And so it's like, even only 2 years later, by the time Lake Placid come around, I felt like it was kind of tired, and like, you could see movies kind of trying to cash in on what other movies were successful in doing. So that's, and I said, I wish I could get into that, but I feel like once Anaconda kind of made it work, as far as Anaconda could make it work, there's not really a way to repeat that because Anaconda so barely got away with it. And I know, and I struggle because I know people, I don't know why or how, people love Lake Placid for some reason, and I feel like I've actually heard it talked about more than I've heard Anaconda talked about, which is wild to me. I feel like Anaconda's much more successful in being this sort of campy, nature turned monster kind of movie. So, and I love the ending especially. When you think about the whole driving factor for this, plot-wise, if you want to call it that, is they're like a documentary crew that's going out to photograph this tribe and document them. And so when you think about that was the catalyst of everything that happened here. I love that the last scene of the movie is them seemingly coming across the tribe by accident, and Jennifer Lopez is like, that's the tribe, get the camera. And then Ice Cube goes to get the camera, and then it just abruptly cuts to them leaving, and then the credits roll. So the objective had basically nothing to do with anything as far as what the movie was interested in. And I feel like that says a lot about the kind of movie that this is. And the fact that it doesn't really... we spend a lot of time on the characters, but it also feels like it gets to the point. I think that opening with Danny Trejo helps a lot as far as the movie feeling like it gets to its point quickly, and it's here to do one thing and then it's done. And the movie is only like an hour and 29 minutes, and it's nice and it's swift. It knows exactly what to do with itself, and then it just ends. So that's how I view Anaconda now. As far as Snakes on a Plane goes, like I said, we are taking a different approach now because it's, well, like I said, they partially knew what they wanted to do as far as the movie becoming a meme before it even came out. So, to my understanding, it was actually, talking about the 90s where Anaconda came from, apparently Snakes on a Plane was a few, like, rejected scripts for all by the same guy, where he was like, he kept putting them out there, like, all through the 90s, and they kept getting rejected. And the movie took a long time, and then during that, I think it was called Snakes on a Plane, but it was like, he was inspired by, like, World War II, like, plane stories where you heard about snakes, like, getting in and stuff like that. And he thought that would make an effective, like, sort of action kind of horror movie. And once that finally started getting picked up by New Line, and then Samuel L. Jackson got a hold of it, then it kind of started becoming a thing. But then they wanted to change the title to something more generic. So generic I don't even remember what it is, like Flight something or Air Flight something, and like a number. And it was Samuel L. Jackson that said, no, you have to change it back, because that's the whole reason I signed on. Because he had just done Formula 51 with Ronnie Yu, and I guess like Ronnie Yu was initially signed on to it, which I could totally imagine Ronnie Yu doing this movie. I'm really interested in what it would have looked like if he did. And so the title and the premise and Ronnie Yu were the only reason Samuel L. Jackson signed on. There wasn't even like an approved script, I don't think, yet, or at least one that he had seen. And so to go on that and then look at how the movie became a phenomenon based on that. Based on Samuel L. Jackson and Snakes on a Plane, and that basically created the whole marketing created itself, essentially, and they just kind of had to lean into it, and then that's what became of it. And we'll talk more about Samuel L. Jackson, but to talk about the movie itself and the nature of this, it is interesting when we talk about the opening scene of Anaconda with Danny Trejo, and how it really genuinely sets the tone. So you go into Snakes on a Plane and you're like, let's see what this is. Let's see what this glorious piece of camp heaven is. And it's a guy riding a dirt bike, and that Lovely Day song is playing, and it's the most like generic font as far as the credits go. And it's like, it feels like you have no idea the kind of movie this is going to be based on this opening. And then we've got a crime boss like hanging a lawyer and beating him to death, and it becomes a sort of witness protection kind of thing. And then it's like, and I remember seeing this in the theater when it came out, in this opening, and I was like, what the hell does this have to do with it? And then yeah, the Snakes on a Plane are one of the most elaborate ways to go about trying to kill a witness that apparently there's ever been. Bobby Cannavale even kind of goes through this. Like, that's the most needlessly elaborate way to kill somebody I've ever heard. And the idea is apparently to bring the whole plane down, so that's where it comes in. But nevertheless, we need a very campy movie to get into, so yeah, we get a plane full of snakes, and that's what it is. And that is, the thing about it is, this movie is pretty much exactly what it promises to be, and that's why it doesn't completely fail like it could have very easily. Because when you just bank on a meme doing your marketing, that's a really easy way to fail. So the fact that this works as well as it does is kind of a miracle. And I think a lot of that actually has to do with where I was talking about Anaconda being very immediate and kind of starting right away and not really having any fat in it. As weird as this sentence is, Snakes on a Plane really takes its time. It's like almost half an hour in before we see a snake. And that might sound like, oh, this movie's bullshit then, and this movie's like false advertising. It's like, that's the whole point of the movie, isn't it? And yeah, typically I probably would say that, but the movie is surprisingly character-focused for like a good 25 minutes, where it's kind of like, not like deep, character focus or anything like that, but it has stuff like, it has fun like roasting entitled rich people that, have to fly a lot, and because everybody has to be everybody in first class has to be demoted to coach because, the FBI has taken over first class for this witness. And to see their reactions to that, it's like, it just feels like it's having fun with, you know, taking a stab at entitled people, and also setting up the body count, and maybe some people, especially that one fucking guy, like the British guy or whatever he is, the businessman that hates the dog, to bring satisfying deaths into it, which is something that horror movies have kind of always done, where you'll have innocent victims, and victims they try to play up as, like, you know, sad scenes. Then there's just, like, faceless bodies. Then there's the bodies that you don't like, you actually look forward to the moment they're gonna get their death scene. Because obviously horror fans like us are insane, but that's the way it is. And also, like, some actually surprisingly funny moments between the characters. Like, the moment where she's talking to the witness, and she doesn't know yet that he's a witness because he witnessed this particular crime boss. So she's talking about how she saw that crime boss on a crime show, and basically the horrible, graphic, gruesome things he does to witnesses, and the fact that she doesn't know that this guy is a witness, makes that situation kind of funny. And another thing I was going to mention as far as a comparison was talking about the entitled rich people and stuff like that. I did find it interesting that that's how they set up Jonathan Hyde's character in Anaconda, but it's kind of only his introduction and maybe a scene or two after that. But then after that, he ingrains himself into the group pretty well and just kind of becomes one of them. Snakes on a Plane, however, is more interested in kind of setting up the body count that'll satisfy us, so there is that. But yeah, it really takes its time, and it's nearly in the half-hour mark that we even realize what's going on and how snakes figure into it, because they kind of shroud it to us for a while that we know something is going on. It's interesting that this movie, the whole marketing around this movie was the title and the concept itself, because if you were to go into it completely blind, and if you missed the opening credits that say the title, you would have no idea that snakes are what they're using. They're just building up that the crime boss and his people know that this witness is on this plane, and now they're going to do something to try to stop him from testifying. And they throw in clues like spraying the pheromones on the leis and stuff like that. But they really take their time revealing that it's snakes. And I don't know, even you would think that would be infuriating because everybody knows what the concept of this movie is, and that's the whole point. But I don't know, there's something playful about that. I like the fact that it takes so long to even show us what it is. Like, it's like they think they're hiding something from us when we know what the whole movie is based on the title alone. The whole movie. And to play like we don't know is really funny in its own way. And like I said, I feel like that's sort of intentional. Like it's playing with us on purpose. And I don't mind that. But we were talking about the combination of effects in Anaconda, where you can see animatronics in Anaconda, but the CGI looks shoddy. Pretty much all the snakes. Anything related to a snake in any way whatsoever in Snakes on a Plane is going to be CGI. There's, like, maybe a couple of times, like, maybe, like, the one that falls on Taylor Kitsch at one point, and maybe some other... Every now and then, they kind of look like they might be rubber snakes. Which sounds super cheap, but at the same time, rubber snakes look surprisingly more real than CGI snakes do. So it has that going for it. And yeah, talking about how playful this movie is and how it's going to really dive into that camp factor of its concept. And it's like... Alright, so how can we shock the audience once they already know they're getting Snakes on a Plane? Well, for starters, the first thing they have a lot of fun with is what various body parts in what various contexts are going to get bit by snakes and attacked by snakes. So, we have Taylor Kitsch here. Before anybody knew who he was, and he and his girlfriend are having the sex scene in the bathroom, which Lin Shaye has some funny reactions to, because it wouldn't be a campy New Line movie without Lin Shaye in it, of course. And so, because of this, we get this girl getting bit on the tit by a snake. Then we have the guy who goes to take a piss and it latches onto his dick. Naturally, of course that's going to happen. What I actually love about this moment, when you talk about the snakes having to be animated in CGI, there's actually one moment here where the CGI looks really good, and you would never guess what it is. When the guy's apparently not paying attention, well, for some reason when he takes it out, he says, "Hello, big boy," or something like that. because guys do that, I guess. And then he starts to piss on the snake without realizing it. And for some reason, I just love the way the snake reacts to this. Somebody had to animate this snake getting its head pissed on and like reacting to it. Like it's a like not even that it's pissed or that that's what sets it off, but it's like mildly annoyed by this situation. Like he's mildly annoyed that this is the where he decided to come through onto the plane. And then of course that happens. And we get stuff like, you know, it going between the woman's legs and then up her shirt, and she's like dreaming, so she's having some erotic dream apparently. And they play with that for a while, but then it just turns into total chaos. I do have to say, is it really bad? Like, is it awful of me that I have such a terrible, horrible vomit phobia that when the girl goes to use her vomit bag and a snake jumps out of it and jumps down her throat and keeps her from doing it, I consider that snake the hero of the movie for me, personally. So, maybe I'm just an awful person. But, yeah, then this is where I kind of start to appreciate the movie for the way it plays just total and complete chaos, because the movie also has a very confined setting for the most part. Like, we have, you know, Bobby Cannavale and the snake expert on the outside trying to get the antivenom here and stuff like that and figure out, you know, who's responsible for this as far as getting this, you know, crime boss, these snakes and stuff like that. But while that whole thing's going on outside, a lot of the movie is set in the plain setting. And with everything that happens here and how out of control everything gets, they use the confines of this set really well. And the way they, like, the chaos, like, escalates, where, like, eventually the boa drops down, or there's, when the stairs start collapsing, these feel like really big set pieces for what's obviously a confined set. And the way they're able to put all the chaos in that and make everything feel like you can actually feel the chaos. It doesn't feel like over-edited or like you can't really tell what's going on. You can see everything that's happening very clearly and see like every little bit of chaos that's happening. That guy that gets his head stepped on and the heel gets stuck in it, which might be one of the worst things that happens in the movie to somebody. And it's like, I feel like we actually could have had more of that, more of the accidental kills throughout it, to kind of just show off the chaos. But that one in particular really sticks out to me. But and I also like moments that seem kind of cheap, but they actually found a way to play with audience expectations kind of well. Where there's the moment when we get a taste of the snakes before all hell breaks loose, and Rachel Blanchard's like reaching into her purse, and we see a snake moving around in there, and she reaches her hand in, and just as we're expecting her to scream, Keenan screams about his video game. And it's like stuff like that, just little misdirections like that, just work for me and show how playful the movie's being, and how, like, it's really... I don't think anybody thought this movie was threatening to take itself too seriously. But like, it's how playful the movie actually is, and actually really uses the concept. It didn't just bank on the concept and then say, alright, I'm done, and throw its hands up and say, I'm not really going to put any more effort into this. It does feel like they knew they had to expand on the concept a little bit, and were able to, like I said, as far as using such a confined setting, it's surprisingly impressive on a production level, honestly. While still throwing in those little details, while all this death is happening so quickly. But also these, you know, moments where the humans start fighting back against the snakes, and there's that one moment that I think in the theater I saw it too, but maybe I thought I was seeing things, I don't know, because it's only shown one time. When that flight attendant throws the snake into the microwave and makes it explode, there's a button on the microwave that says snake. And it's like, the fact that somebody went through the trouble of putting that detail there shows what can be appreciated about this movie and how much it really embraced itself. Because not only does it... Okay, first of all, it gives dignity to its characters, some of its characters in surprising ways. Like, there's actually some genuine emotion between, like, the two kids, the two little brothers. where the big brother was looking after the little brother, and the little brother's the one that got bit. So the big brother's like feels guilty about this, and this is a continuous thing of them, everybody like banding together to take care of those kids. That's like genuinely sort of poignant amongst all this campy mess that's going on. And I was talking about the Lin Shaye character and the way that she makes that sacrifice to go save the baby, and then her death ends up becoming genuinely tragic and sad. When it's like, oh, I was supposed to retire, but I did this one more time. How stupid was that? And then, like, the last moment she has before she dies is this moment where the mother assures her, "You were here for a purpose because you saved my baby," and it brings her to this peace before she dies, and like how she dies in this heroic way, and it really works as a character moment in a very surprising way. And even Keenan has a couple moments also, despite being a more or less comedic character, where I said talking about them banding together to take care of those kids. The way he comes over to one of the kids and like shows him his video game to kind of like keep him calm while all this is going on, and then when he stands up to like the rapper, and like when he tries to talk him down after he takes Jackson's gun. All of those are character moments. Even the rapper himself is set up as like this sort of secondary antagonist. Like he's kind of the human antagonist in the way that Voight was in Anaconda, but just very, very briefly. There's like the one moment where he takes the gun and then he pretty much comes to his senses. Which once again is actually kind of nice because it could have been very easy to go the making him an antagonist like John Voight route, and the movie doesn't really say that. It's already got an antagonist that's out of the mood for the rest of the movie. He's off screen, but still, the fact that they didn't lean into that too much, and the interesting thing also about the rapper character is he's obviously another one of those rich entitled people, and he's like comes off really douchey, especially when there's that moment where the kid like touches him or shakes his hand or something, and he like immediately goes after hand sanitizer. And what I actually like about this character, even though they do play him up as a douchebag for most of the movie, the fact that at first it seems like, oh, I don't like peasants touching me. I hate when poor people touch me. It's gross. I hate people. And it's like, it seems like it's part to add to his personality of a douche, and that's it. But as the movie goes on and this becomes a continuous thing, it's like, no, it wasn't to make him look like a douche. It kind of came off that way, but it wasn't really to make him look like a douche. The character's just a legit germaphobe, and and that's just part of him. So I like that they actually used that throughout and kind of made it more of like part of his character rather than just, oh, here's another reason this guy's a douchebag. So yeah, like I said, there's actually some dignity to these characters, some of them. And of course, talking about dignity in Samuel Jackson's presence here, and if you like, the most sort of dignified thing about the movie is having Samuel Jackson's name on it and him at the center of it. And the thing about it is, and apparently, the reason he took the movie was that, even without a script, was that he just kind of loves these kind of movies, and basically he was at a point in his career where he could basically do anything for fun at this point, because he'd already had like a shitload of money and some of the highest grossing movies ever by that point. So for him it was just like a why not scenario, and the fact that it was almost like this sort of personal sort of nostalgic thing for him, where it was like these were the kind of movies that he loved going to see as a kid, and to kind of be in one of those was really cool. Like these sort of drive-in kind of movies and these campy B movies. And it's like, yeah, why not do that? Because, I mean, if you want to talk about an actor with dignity, yeah, Samuel Jackson has done all kinds of things, good and bad, and just like, what the fuck were you thinking? And, he's also done some of the best performances of all time. Like, you can point a specific finger at Pulp Fiction. In Pulp Fiction, Samuel Jackson gives, from the bottom of my heart, one of the greatest performances of all time. And so the fact that he can sort of balance these in his career, he can do big prestige projects and movies like this, and he's found a comfort in both of them. And he's never really strayed too far from one or the other. It seems to be a pretty balanced thing that he's figured out. And it's hard to find actors that are as diverse as he is. And so I don't just love that he does movies like this and this movie specifically, but that he does them so proudly. Like I was saying, it was almost like when you read his interviews, it's like he was genuinely offended when people would say like, oh, Samuel Jackson's above this. And it's like, this is the shit that he loves. And so, and the fact that he can, as an actor, do this just because also brings this sort of dignity to the movie that he brings along with him. So I feel like that goes a long way also. And also talking about what I was talking about with the Sharknado effect, where, yeah, they embraced a meme, and usually I would say that's not a good call. And I think it was even considered like a box office disappointment and stuff like that. But I think it helps a lot because the reason I hate movies like Sharknado is they think they can just make it happen. They think they can make a movie. Where I was talking about with Anaconda, it seems to have happened by accident with people trying to make a genuine movie for the most part. Um, but here, as far as them embracing what people might think is a campy movie right away, and something banking on such a B movie concept, they could have just been really lazy about that. But I think it helps that the script that it started as was much more grounded and much more serious, and then they, like, once the meme took off, they went back and did like 5 days of reshoots, to add those elements where they lean into it once again. Really, really fucking risky. Because it's stuff like this that usually makes movies fail miserably, and it's embarrassing. But this was a particular movie where it feels like, especially in retrospect, there was no other way but to lean into the concept. Otherwise, this would have been a forgotten straight-to-DVD movie. And while the phenomenon may be, what it is, where, like, it's just a meme of the past now, even though you'll still see the clip of him saying the line, to applause. But yeah, the idea that it feels like it started in a place and then they leaned into it, it does feel like it was kind of a perfect storm, that this movie isn't a complete disaster. And that might sound like a backhanded compliment, but, it snakes on a plane. And I feel like it's the kind of movie that, if there's some merit in it, at least a little bit, that's enough, I guess. So the movie even ends with a music video. There's a music video during the end credits, that's about snakes on a plane, more or less. So that's the thing, is it's exactly the kind of movie it was trying to be, and exactly the kind of movie that it needed to be. And it's got those thrills in it. It's got what everybody goes into it paying money to see. There's actually some genuine jump scares that are really fun. Like the moment where Juliana Margulies is like looking down, looking for David Koechner, and that one pops out. Or the one that pops out like right at the end as they're getting off the plane, and then they do just one more for fun as it's cutting to black, and that's the kind of movie where it's like, yeah, you do that movie, like, you do your thing, and it's working for you, like, it's then you would think like it'd be more and more eye roll inducing as it went, but it's like, no, the more it embraced itself, the more it was like, yeah, I'll get behind you. Why not? Like, and like I said, I think Samuel Jackson and some of the cast are bringing some actual, like, genuine dignity to the project. And this, fuck it, we're having fun, sort of ideas to the concept. And it's like, yeah, go for it. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be, like I was saying, the phenomenon itself kind of happened by accident. Because it was going to be a Samuel Jackson movie with snakes on a plane, but wasn't, like, a meme didn't exist yet, and the internet just kind of made that happen. The movie wasn't trying to be anything until those reshoots. But I guess only 5 days of reshoots. I'm not sure what all they accomplished, but it's something that's really captured lightning in a bottle as far as embracing that without completely fucking up and embarrassing themselves. So it's fun, and that's exactly what it needed to be. So, I mean, I'm probably more likely to come back to Anaconda, and maybe that's just a nostalgia factor. But like I said, it also feels like there's something more old-fashioned about Anaconda, I think, that kind of appeals to me. But not that Snakes on a Plane doesn't have like an old-fashioned B-movie feel in itself. But I don't know, there's just something about Anaconda where I've always had some sort of place for it inside me. And that's just how I got here. So, that's how I feel about these. We've got one more video of reviews for September, and then it's time for the October stuff. We finally made it to October. So, that's what we've got going on. So until then, that's it.